This is Hidden Killers Week in Review.
A look back at the most prolific stories of the week.
This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
You hear the term masked intruder and knife, and your imagination races faster than a fingerprint dries. But investigations don't sprint on fear. They methodically walk. The Pullman break-in is exactly the kind of moment. Small, frightening, ripe for wild speculation, especially when later a suspect appears in the same orbit of time and space, whose name happens to be Brian Kohberger, who's suspected at the moment of killing 4 Idaho students, 3 of which are college girls, one of them's boyfriend, in a house late at night. Similar to this other break-in, which happened months before these crimes. You're going to ask questions. They did ask questions. They looked at Kohberger. And there's a lot of speculation out there online about, was it him? Was that his dry run? And it's fair to ask the question, but it's important to also align that question with reality. And that's what we're going to do here. It may not be as sexy. It may not be as dark and disturbing as one would want it to be. It may not play into the Lifetime movie version of what this story will be. But it certainly needs some examination. Because it very well, I guess, potentially could be part of the story. Odds are fairly low, but it could be. And it does tell you that just because you caught one villain doesn't mean there aren't others out there operating completely individual of one another. So let's slow this story down piece by piece and understand the honest work behind why investigators looked and why they ultimately looked the other way. Let's go back to this story. This one takes place in October of 2021 in Pullman, Washington. At a sorority house just off campus, one of the residents was woken up in the dead of night. A masked man stood at the foot of her bed, brandishing a knife. She kicked him in the stomach. Good for her. He fled. No shots fired, no screams broadcast, no forensic gold, just adrenaline and the 1,000 what-ifs that follow. For the women that were living there in that house, it was trauma encoded against their walls. For investigators, it became an unresolved case file with a red flag on top, and one that sat open in the drawer of Detective S in Pullman's PD office for months, then almost a year. Fast forward to December of 2022, 4 University of Idaho students are found stabbed to death in a home in Moscow. The suspect, graduate student Brian Kohberger. When news broke, rumors spread. Speculation flourished. They had not caught anybody for that Pullman break-in yet. But geez, that happened not long ago. Yeah. Could it be connected? Law enforcement in Pullman quietly reopened that file, searching for answers. Here's a critical point. Part of good policing is revisiting old files when a new suspect fits a similar pattern. A masked intruder with a knife, same weapon type, same targeted vulnerability, women at home, same type of night, similar college towns. That's what pushes cops from Pullman to say, we should check. It isn't a headline grab, it's a process, a matter of duty, not narrative. But then comes the detective work. You check travel history, flight logs, class schedules. Did this guy fly west the semester before? Well, as of research now, the answer is no. Kohberger was, as far as we are aware, still at DeSales University in Pennsylvania that fall. He would arrive to Pullman until 2022. Police dug into recordings, into emails. Was he ever in the area on academic business, weekend events, lecture visits? Well, nothing really ever lined up. They spoke to local professors. There was no connection. The geographic and temporal alignment didn't exist. And for 9 days, he was a person of interest, not a lockup, not a headline. He was already locked up, but someone who needed to be ruled out. 9 days of interviews, timeline tracing, photo lineups, digital footprint chasing. It's not always quick and neat, and it's always exhausting on the victims to be in that sorority house. But they did it, and once it was clear he couldn't have been there, not physically, not digitally, not in any identifiable way, they closed their law enforcement file on him for that case. The case remained open, but not pending on him. Be nice to make him the boogeyman in that case, but sorry, you still got a boogeyman out there. It's that kind of discipline that rarely makes for a viral soundbite, but it's a discipline worth honoring and worth telling. So let's zoom out on why this matters. First, it speaks to investigative integrity. Not every similar incident is the same crime. Masks and knives don't connect hearts or honor. Only evidence does. The name on a case file, even a high-profile one, is not enough. You need confirmations, alibis, witnesses, digital footprints. Without them, you clear responsibility. That's what happens here. And what happened here. Second, it exemplifies how narrative poison spreads. The public tends to think similar patterns equals same person, and sometimes it does. A lot of crime shows lean on that. That's why we ask questions. But it's also important for crime shows to just accept reality on reality's terms when the evidence shows, you might have been leaning into something, but if that's not what the evidence shows, then sorry. And in my opinion, I think you got another creep out there. There are creeps like this on college campuses. That's not new news. Not all of them go to the extent of Kohberger, but there are certainly individuals that do this sort of thing that need to be found. And it's easier to find them when you're looking for the right person, not hung up on if this boogeyman over here is that boogeyman over there. People across jurisdictions are often unconnected. A late-night intruder with a knife could just be as easily someone local, disturbed, desperate, or displaced. We don't hate speculation. We just shouldn't mistake it for proof. Third, it shows how investigators stay accountable, especially when the suspect had already been convicted elsewhere. If you're watching from home, you might hear investigating and think suspect, but sometimes reinvestigate simply means make sure and then move forward. And that's what was done. Authorities made sure, then move forward. Not the same thing as wrestling for headlines. Finally, there's a broader lesson about pattern seeking and false positives. Criminal minds do pattern recognition better than any software because they generate it themselves. Investigators do pattern recognition too, but they also test and cross-reference. They catch their own bias. And the Pullman case, reopened and closed, underscores how important that safeguard is. So when you ask me to tell you that story, what I'm really telling you is this. Uncertainty isn't weakness. It's the torch investigators carry in the dark. They'll check every case that echoes. They'll put your name in another file if circumstances suggest they should. But they also know when to eject it. And that's not sensational. It's essential. Because remember, the human center here, 4 women traumatized by a masked break-in, they didn't get a smoking gun suspect. They got someone who checked the file more than once. For them, that can feel like empty reassurance, but it's all we can promise at this point. That someone didn't stop looking for answers, even when it was inconvenient or quiet. They just couldn't find the connection to this guy. So, When snippets from the Pullman file appear later, Kohberger was evaluated. He was cleared of 9 of the charges of any sort of accusations here and cleared in 9 days. It's not a second act in a sensational crime drama or a precursor to one, which is what this would be if it was him. It's a note in the margin of a real process, a mark that says, yes, we considered it, no, we found nothing to support it, and yes, that matters. That's the one thing we can be clear on. Not everyone who looks like they fit the pattern belongs in the same story. Lives run parallel. Masks don't equate to membership. Knives don't tether. The Pullman break-in didn't connect. And that's not disappointing. That's just truth. And sometimes in a case steeped in loss and confusion, the most humane conclusion is the one that doesn't force a fit. So if you're telling that story, you're not just recounting an investigation. You're honoring rigorous doubt. You're acknowledging that suspicion doesn't equal guilt. You're telling a story about how real investigations distinguish between echo and evidence. And when the echoes fade, what remains isn't emptiness, it's clarity. It's saying, we didn't find you here, but we didn't stop looking. And they should still keep looking. Unfortunately, this many years ago, a masked man showing up in a house and a knife, getting kicked in the chest and running away. The odds of figuring out who that are, or who that is, are not that great. And thankfully, we haven't heard reports of this one striking again in many years. Was that a one and done? Was it Kohberger? Well, there's no 100% absolutes in this world. But this one, if you really look at the evidence, I don't think it was him. I really don't. So if we want to learn and understand anything about how this all went down, how well planned it was or how sloppy it was, depending on how you're looking at it, just make sure whatever pieces you're adding to that puzzle, marbles you're putting in that jar that you say these are connected to that case, are actually connected to that case. It gets dangerous when they're not. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube. Just search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. You can also make that same search wherever you're downloading podcasts, so you can take us on the go wherever you are. But again, let us know your thoughts and press subscribe so you don't miss any of our coverage on this case and the many that we cover for you here at the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. My name's Tony Brueski. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.